introducing my sponsor, Kelly. I met Kelly when I had about a year and a half of sobriety, and I was struggling so much. When I first came to AA, I was living in a small town in Idaho, where I'm from, and I had the gift of desperation real bad. And when I got into the rooms, I was so gung ho, and my life got a lot better, as they say it does. And it got so good that I got into my dream grad program here in Missoula. And I got here, and this is so much different than the AA I'm used to. I'm used to like five old dudes, the same five old dudes in a room who just like walked me through every step. And I just felt so invisible here. And I got really scared because I felt like I was distancing from the program. And I went to meetings and I'd seen Kelly at a couple meetings, and she was always the one who was clapping the longest after the speaker, and she was so gung ho. And I was like, I need what that lady has. And I got her number and I texted her and explained just where I was at, that I felt like I was falling away from AA, and it was the scariest thing ever, that that gift of desperation was coming back, and I hadn't had that in sobriety yet. And she said, I'm here for you. I got you. And I remember she said, you are not falling through the cracks. You are seen. And that has been so true. She sees me, and I'm so grateful to have her as a sponsor, so grateful to still be sober. Um, and I'm really excited for all you guys to have Kelly talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Aiden. I'm Kelly. I'm an alcoholic. Um, Thanks again, Aiden, for I know it can be really scary. Um, Welcome. Congratulations on 30 days, Mac. That's a big deal. And I just want to say I appreciated that you brought your big book up and that you used the word honesty more than once up here. I struggled with that piece for a long time. Um, I was born born and raised in an alcoholic home. My dad is an alcoholic. His sister's an alcoholic. One of her two kids is an alcoholic. And on my dad's side of the family, it's just alcoholism is just, the fruit that blooms. It's just the way it is. And on my mom's side of the family, while she isn't one of us in that way, um, she struggled from mental illness, and it was just predominantly the men in her family. She had two brothers, and both of them were alcoholic drug addicts. One died before he reached 20 years of age, and the other, I went to his funeral a few years ago, and it was really a sad event. My sobriety date is October 1st of 2009. Thank you. Paula P is my sponsor. My home group is the No Name Group. We meet on Mondays and Fridays at 7 o'clock at St. Paul's Church. And I'm so grateful for the community in Missoula of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like Aiden had mentioned, we're everywhere, small towns, big cities. I've gone to meetings in, definitely across Europe and Canada and Mexico. And I'll tell you what, I love Missoula AA. I would not be here, or probably the enthusiastic person that, overclaps and overshares and, hugs for too long. And I've been called all sorts of stuff, why are she so happy? Phony baloney and all that. And you know what? I'll take it, because there were times in my life where none of those things were attached to my name nor my presence. My sobriety date isn't October 30th of 2002, when I took my last drink at Liberty Lanes here. I was wearing a pair of my dad's jeans. My face was ruddy. My whole body proportion was messed up because my face was so full of fluid, and I looked like this, but my skinny little legs, and that look that we have when we're dying of malnutrition of the soul, of just I was not feeding good actions, which doesn't make me feel good, and it showed up on that. It wasn't my last that wasn't my sobriety date. My sobriety date isn't June 20th of 2004, when my dad called my sponsor from my hospital room after coming by ambulance gray. My mom had done CPR on me. That wasn't my sobriety date either. But I was showing up in AA. I was not honest. I was full of fear and I was full of what y'all thought about me. So I thought. That's like a noble thing to say, but the truth is I was a people pleaser that pleased no one. I was super manipulative and I really just wanted the moment to be over so I could go back home and just think. I knew I wanted what you had and I was in no way willing to go to any length to get it. But I will say this, that coming to AA 5 days a week, sponsoring women and lying to a sponsor, my life really did get a little bit better. It wasn't awesome. I had no sunlight of the spirit, but I was tethered in a way that I didn't know would be the foundation that saved my life. Um, my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, I when I first got in here, I'm so grateful that I found a warm, loving sponsor who, was doing the deal and that she wasn't necessarily worried about making me feel good and said as much. She was like, don't go by what makes you feel good right now. Because what was making me feel good, right before I got into AA was thinking and coming up with all sorts of lies about how it wasn't that bad for me and you guys just need to get off my back and I was different from you here and here, and that's worse than your hardest thesis statement trying to figure out how to stay drunk when you know at 16 years old that you have the ism. My dad was just a few years sober when I took my first drink. um, and I knew from just watching the way he behaved that he was more than outwardly different. I didn't understand it. I didn't know it, but I knew that when my folks, when I stayed at my dad's house, that he was watching me closer than I'd ever been watched before. He was paying attention to my grades, and it felt like care, and I didn't care for myself. When I started drinking, I was a freshman in high school. I'd entered into high school with five best friends. Um, I had good self-esteem in middle school. I know that's weird to say, but that was literally my height. I mean, I, I loved Duran Duran. I still do. I love to dance. I felt good about myself, and I felt safe in the hands and in the homes of my friends. I didn't yet feel safe in my own home because I didn't really feel safe in my own body. So what I developed was this outwardly, you can make me feel good about me. And so I started hanging around that, and it worked enough. I was insulated in a way where I started hanging around people that felt and looked like they were doing better than me. And so I had these friends, and I was growing up in their homes in middle school, having all sorts of middle school experiences that didn't include drinking. I still played with dolls. I wasn't interested in kissy face with boys. I looked like, Opie Taylor from Mayberry, or, some other, I know, thank you for getting my joke. Da- Dating myself here. Um, I looked like a boy. I didn't pay attention to what my butt looked like in jeans for a long time. But when I started drinking in high school, it was the wheels fell off immediately. I was no longer in honors algebra. I was no longer showing up with those five best friends to their plays, their tennis matches, their sleepovers. I was no longer accountable in any way. I was jumping out of my window, trying to catch the car that had just dropped me off with boys, that weren't in high school and weren't doing good things. And I was scaring everybody around me that cared, and I was super attracted to those that didn't. And it was off. I would try every drug I would ever do by the time I was 16. I'm sure now I can say that y'all understand when I say memes. There's those memes going around on the internet like, ha ha, you thought I was sleeping over at Amy's house. I was really dying of alcohol poisoning in a field. And we laugh, but we know that's accurate. Man, I mean, I was buying crack in Seattle at 16 years old. They're trying to grab me out of the car, and the guys I'm with are shoving hundreds of dollars of bills down my pants, trying to keep. I mean, it was that, those are scary things. And for normal people, I hear their stories and like, and that was it for me. And but not me. Unfazed. Alcoholism is progressive and fatal, and mine went quick. I didn't graduate from high school. I came dangerously close. And they talk about it in the big book when they're describing our malady that Bill Wilson, or they were trying to explain to us. It's like, it's not a matter of will. You know, people drink, you won the lottery. Your dreams are coming true. Everything you've ever wanted is waiting in Helena, Montana, but you're not in Helena. You're in Missoula. And you take a drink and you don't make it. You blow that opportunity, you blow that scholarship, you blow that marriage, you lose that custody. And I've sat in the front row at custody hearings with women that love their children. I've never been to a jail meeting sitting with women that don't love their children. And I wish I could say I'm the kind of gal that quits drinking and smoking when she finds out she's pregnant, but I'm not. I'm not. The disease that I have completely and utterly replaces everything in me to saying, it's not that bad. You should take a drink. You deserve it. I'll get 30 days next time. Maybe. It was years in between. I went to my first AA meeting when I was 19 years old. I stood up with some friends in Boulder, Colorado, and I said, my name is Kelly, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm going to go straight to the sink and get a shot of fire water and a Pabst Blue Ribbon right after this meeting. That was and that was 100% true. All of it, that I am an alcoholic and that I did treat my alcoholism with drugs and alcohol until what? Until it quit working. And I mean, let's be honest, it quit working immediately. It really did, but it caught up with me and I could no longer avoid the fact that it was not working. And it was way less scary to just call that sponsor that I'd already had for 6 years and to tell my sponsees that I'd been working with for 4 years that I was not indeed sober, that I had been lying in your loving meetings. And I had been sitting on your couch telling you a version that I really hope to be true someday. And you know what? My story's not that different now, except for dates and a deep truth inside of me. So I called that sponsor and I said, I've been lying to you. I'd had a boy, a young son. He was 18 months old at the time. I married this guy I used to drink and do drugs with, but he's not one of us. And when it came time to buy a home, settle down, be responsible, he could, and he did, and I didn't. But that day something changed in me, and I made a shift from wanting to look good to wanting to be good. In my heart, I am a good person. We are good people. This disease isn't about, bad people versus good people. And it certainly, didn't teach me how to, make a ton of money or, be successful in any other way other than I don't have to drink one day at a time. My first step was just pretty simple. I just didn't know anything. I just didn't know anything. I was 35 years old. I knew I wanted to have another baby. I was living in the house I live in today. I was driving the same car I drive today, married to the same man I have today. Everything looked so similar, but everything was different. And I was scared. I was so afraid. And I wasn't necessarily afraid so much as what you guys were going to think of me, because God bless you guys are the nicest, kindest, most loving people. And we don't indeed punish the people that come back in and say, oops, a daisy, or you were right. We don't sit there and relish in being right. God knows we don't do well with being right. So I wasn't afraid of that. You'd proven to me over and over again that these rooms were safe. And so I came back here. But what scared me more than anything, and we talked about it in a meeting yesterday. Happy birthday, 60 Days, Amy. It's good to see you today. It was really nice to be there yesterday to see you get that coin. Yeah, that's awesome. We were talking about it yesterday that change is hard and change is scary. And especially for an alcoholic who has a brain that tells them all sorts of lies to stay, in the disease. And once you separate yourself from that, a whole new set of fear and all that stuff comes up. But what I learned eventually was that God consciousness, a connection to a power greater than myself. Hey, please don't ask me to define it because I have no idea what that's like for any of you. I mean, we see symbols and we go to churches and we gather and we do things, but like deep in the heart of whatever soul, your bottom, your recovery, your surrender, who knows what it is? It's shifted and changed for me over the years. What used to keep me sober, and sane isn't necessarily the same recipe but it's all the same ingredients. You know, I put things in at different times in different ways, but the bottom line is go to bed sober tonight and wake up tomorrow and say you're going to do it again today. And anything that gets in the way of that, wave your arms, scream fire, call a bajillion people. Don't call three. Don't satisfy yourself. Well, I tried. Did you? Only one time in my 20 plus years, without 20 plus years of sobriety, if you do the math, of being in AA, have I actually heard of somebody holding one of us down and trying to pour booze down their throat. And what saved him from having to change his sobriety date or not be with us today was that he started praying. People had him down, pinned, and it was a fun little treat for them to try to put booze down the alcoholic in sobriety's mouth. And he started praying. They got off him. He has no explanation for that other than a higher power saved him from that moment. So what I know keeps me sober today is coming here, saying yes, getting over myself, looking bad. Oh man, so many times feeling bad. And none of it compares to the self-loathing that got me here. October 1st of 2009 is a date that I cherish. And that's almost all you need to know about me, but that's not why you brought me here today. So I'll just tell you a little bit. Didn't graduate from high school, moved around all of the Western United States, the big cities, Denver, Seattle, San Diego, Phoenix. And I did the same thing, different day, different outfits, different climate, different fun, different lies, different relationships, but all the same premise of I'm going to manipulate you so that you can pretend to make me feel good about me. I would make you tell me how much you loved me. I would make you show up for me. And listen, I'm not one of those people that has a broken picker. I have a really good picker. All my boyfriends and friends were good, and I was the problem. Yes, yes, they can all, I'm sure they've got a little club somewhere, dodged a bullet. Um, I'm not invited, very anonymous, but I do know their names and their addresses. Um, so it was the same story. It was the same story, and it got really tired and it got really exhausting. And when I finally, could no longer deal with any of that, I came back to Missoula, Montana. I always came back. I was born and raised here, and I would always come back for like, I'm going to get a bed date. I'm going to go to, I'd fill out the alcohol assessments, even though there's no assessing anything. I knew my dad had gotten sober. My aunt had gotten sober. Her son had gotten sober, and their lives were better. The people in my life that were surrounding me that I used to drink with, were starting to say things like, I'm going to stay in tonight. I have a big presentation tomorrow. I mean, I would go to my best friend's house and she had a calendar, a wall calendar, and she had appointments on it and she would keep them. And I was jealous because I couldn't keep an appointment. I couldn't hold down a job. I couldn't hold down a conversation. I would have to flee. I was never I was never a drinker at house parties because there's too many walls. I've got to flee. So I would go to bars in big cities so I could just leave in the middle of my lie because people were figuring it out. I had no moral responsibility to tell the truth. I just didn't have that. So I would come back to Missoula periodically to get sober or sober up or dry out or do whatever I needed to do, get a hold of some friends, have them buy me a bus ticket or a plane ticket. And I drank like we do, man. I drank to oblivion. I never ordered just one drink, ever. And I never left the bar. I'm right here, boom, walked in, and I want a double tall Bacardi and Diet Coke and 2 shots of Jägermeister and a beer if you're going to cut me off, because I can nurse a beer like no other, but it is such a warm blanket for me because sitting in front of nothing, having nothing coming through my veins, down my throat, whatever, scares me more than anything. I don't want to be sober. I remember very much in high school taking a little Smurf breakfast tray all the way down to my high school bedroom after my folks had gone to bed, and I would steal whatever was in the thing, whether it be cat tranquilizers or, my dad's amitriptyline, or if on a desperate night, a little NyQuil with some Theraflu and some Equil and a straw. I mean, I'm 16, I'm 17, right? And going down to my room. And that's so it just scared me. I didn't know how to live life without it, without that, without something. And now, at 16 plus years of sobriety, what keeps me sober is my 100% flawed but tried and true relationship with a higher power. That's what keeps me sober. And the only way that I can maintain that relationship is by coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and by going through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get the benefit of doing it with a sponsor. I've had two of the best sponsors in the world, in my opinion. And by looking at you guys and by hearing you guys come back and say, I went back out, it wasn't awesome. I went back out and we never see him again. That could be me in a heartbeat. And I know that Alcoholics Anonymous works because it isn't a theory. It's proven. It's like my sponsor says, magic math. I mean, if you do what we do, and where it gets dicey is you have to be honest with yourself. That's where it gets mushy, is because if you're not completely honest with yourself about what your motives are and why you're showing up and how you're showing up and where you're showing up, you might fall through those cracks. What an honor to be here with some women that I get to work with. I love you guys. You keep me, on the beam, and make me feel good about the choices that I make when I'm sitting with you. I'm looking across my table going, you're good. This is such an improvement in the way I used to live. So today, higher power for me is indescribable, except for that nothing can shake it. Whether you like me, whether you don't, whether the relationship has come full circle and I need to find something new, or I need to go somewhere different or have something challenging. Having kids is tough because they're so outside of your body, but you're so worried about them all the time, or my experience is. And I just get to send my kids off to their lives knowing that I don't have to drink over anything that transpires with them, with my parents, with my husband. The news isn't always good. Some people I am deeply connected to and I love very, very much have gone through the hardest season of their lives recently. And to be front row to that experience and completely powerless over it at the same time is humbling, man. It's just humbling when you don't get to look into the person's eyes and be like, it's okay, because it might not be. We don't have the results yet. I'm not sure if it's going to be okay when you're sitting in the ER and you're hoping for the best and you don't know. And I've been through my own health challenges. And that really, when I was diagnosed with cancer in 2017, that's when I really started up in my program and things started really shifting for me because I became really in tune with my body. I started listening to my body because I kind of had to. And what my body started doing was like freaking out when I was in the presence of where I shouldn't be. And when I was in cahoots or talking with people that weren't good for my sobriety or my recovery or my experience of finding out what was going to work for me. And so when I started listening to my body and I started, having these weird, like intuitive moments, I didn't question it particularly. And I didn't have to drink over it. And I didn't have to do anything other than suffer. And you guys, if you're new here, I hate to tell you that there's a good amount of suffering that comes with getting sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the suffering that I used to do when I was out there drinking was limitless. It was endless. I would suffer. The bottoms came and went. They got deeper and uglier and worse. And, but the suffering that I do in AA is super temporary. It is really temporary. And it'll shift and change and have a different form. But what I can do is sit in my armchair and cry and feel, and also feel that higher power, warmth, safe, protected. And the book talks about that we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. And we aren't just placed there by happenstance. We're placed there because we walk into AA and we shake and we quake and we tell people that we're doing it and we have 60-day birthdays, but we tell the truth. But we come in here and we tell the truth. And it's not just enough that I know you. The big, big thing here is that you guys know me. That you guys know me. And you'll come knocking on my door. Oh, I can't. I was expecting my dogs to bark. Sorry. That you know me when I am scarce and I'm sparse, or I'm on a vacation, or I'm overseas. You miss me and you want to know where I am. And I get texts. And my favorite thing in the whole wide world is getting a text from a number that's not in my phone with a kindness, with a nice message. And I just know that it's from you. I just know it's from someone here in these rooms, because I don't have friends from before that I don't know, right? I know who they all are. I was saying yesterday, I had a friend who was my drug dealer. I went to high school with her. I'm friends with all of her sisters and all of this stuff. And since I told her, I called her and I said, I'm getting sober. I'm not doing this anymore. So don't get a hold of me. I have not seen her once. I haven't seen her once. And I know she's around. She lives in Missoula. She shops at the same places that I do, but we do not run in the same circles. And I know that my energy and my higher power and my willingness keeps me safe and protected. I just saw Stanley. I want to thank you for asking me to speak today, because it really is an honor to be here and to be sober today. And the 12 steps, the first step is a doozy. It's hard. I didn't want to admit, I knew that I was an alcoholic and I had no control over how much I drank when I drank. That was very clear to me early on. I didn't really necessarily understand it, but I knew to buckle in. And, I knew I wasn't going to go home with who I came with. I knew that. But the unmanageability piece turned out to be what kept me from 16 until 35. That was hard. But I did make that decision and I did come into AA. The second step, I trusted, but I didn't have faith. And then second and third step, I had faith, but I didn't trust. I kind of swapped it. It was really hard to get those two things in the same place at the same time. But steps 4 and 5 really helped me get a grip on the mirror that I was able to finally hold up to myself. And I did them so imperfectly. One of the first times I went through the steps, I just took the blame for everything. And I think that's what I hear sometimes when people are so afraid to do a fearless and thorough fourth step. I'm like, ah! Fine, be scared. Do it anyway. Do it imperfectly. Take all the blame. It's not an overshot, more than likely. But eventually we have to let go of that. I mean, come on, let's. So I took all the blame and I did a fifth step. I don't remember feeling particularly free, but I was honest. I mean, I called her back like 9 times that night. Like, and another thing, I was holding back on that one. And I wasn't really honest. And I have a bottle of pain meds underneath my chair and and all she ever said was, thank you. Thank you. Because what she knew was that the demons were flooding out. With each phone call, she stood by her phone. I mean, she answered it on the first ring every time. It was back when we had home phones. And that was the only phone number. I mean, I can still remember it, 7989. And I did a fifth step, and I did 6 and 7 wrong, and I didn't have some spiritual experience with it all. But when I came to my 9th step amends, I really faced I faced some creditors. I faced some people. I had to tell my husband some truths that, of course, he already knew, but I didn't know he knew. I had to tell my parents some truths. I had to tell my favorite aunt, that I wasn't sober and that my sobriety date that she held so dear and wore so proudly wasn't really it. And that was scary to me. But I just had decided that I just didn't care anymore. So I did the steps and they were imperfect. And as I got a few more 24 hours, one day at a time, spiritual, wellness as it came and went, I started to take less blame for my, actions and started to understand more of the behaviors that were behind why the same stuff was coming up on my 4th steps. I mean, a lot of similar, today when I am afraid of change, or I feel so scared to walk off, I always think about it like skydiving. At some point, you're going to have to let go. At some point. I mean, it's scary the whole time. You make the appointment, that's scary. You go up in the plane, that's scary. You get all hooked up and it's scary. But at some point, you're just going to have to let go or just come back in at some point. And what's way less scary about Alcoholics Anonymous and the change that comes, losing playmates or getting a different job or just deciding that all else is nothing if I don't have recovery and I'm going all in, is just turn right back into your higher power and soften whatever it is that's rigid. Create that safe space, because if you're scared all the time, what feels good to a newly sober person is the drink, the old familiar behaviors. You know, I remember this gal I had was fairly new at taking AA meetings into the correctional facility, and this gal came in, and man, sometimes I am so imperfect that I just alcoholism really grinds my gears. And she was just, kind of telling me how she'd been really screwed over by the judge. And everybody had just really had it out for her, and it wasn't her fault, and she wasn't doing this or that. And she told me how it had happened, that she'd gone to 9 months of a treatment center, and she got back in on the bus, and the story was just my story. And I started thinking, well, I don't have to check in with my PO until this date, and I'll get back to the bus station at like midnight. So nobody's really going to come knocking on my door. And even though, I mean, like, he said that he's going to do this with me. And, oh, la, 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 la. And so the long story, of course, is once again, she did this, the thing that we don't do. She called the person she knew wasn't going to support recovery, and off she went. And I would see that woman. I see her all the time. She has not found what we have here because she does not have the ability yet to see the truth about her behavior and how it always ends up in the same place. And I do want what you guys have, and I am willing to go to any length to get it. And that changes every day. Nobody has asked me to do that. What do they say? Push a pea up the highway. You haven't asked me to do that yet, but I would. I absolutely would. I travel out of town. I've gone, I went to international with an under 1 year old, pushing a stroller all around, the torrential downpour of San Antonio, Texas. And that is not something I ever would have done, had I not decided that you guys looked way better than I felt. And that what you guys had said you were doing, I believed. And what I knew I was doing didn't work. And so, my fourth step is different today because now I can take responsibility and accountability, but I can also not take more than my share. And I can make boundaries and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't think that's a good fit for me. I don't like the way I feel when I am doing these things and spending time in this realm. And that is something that was a gift that came with a few hard fourth and fifth steps, and with some ninth steps I didn't want to keep making. I didn't want to keep making the same amends to people. And we talked about being scared. I had a girlfriend who I met her in second grade, and we became fast friends. We played tetherball in third grade. I remember singing in first grade on the playground, the hostages are free. The hostages are free. It's like my first memory ever of any world event or anything happening. And I remember, finding acorns with this girl, just really innocent, sweet memories until they weren't. Until my alcoholism had me stealing her dead dad's pills out of his bathroom the day he died. And I showed up in her house, and I looked real similar to how I look today. Okay. It was imperceptible. She let me in with open arms. She was living abroad at the time. She was living in Africa, and she came home to have a baby stateside. And so she just had like a 3-week-old baby, and her dad had just died that day. And I showed up with the lasagna, probably still frozen in the middle. And I left with, a bucket of pills, and she caught me, and she called me, and she knew it immediately. She goes, did you take some pills from my bathroom? And I told her the truth. It was one of the first times that I can remember telling the truth like that. And I said, yep. And she goes, bring them back. I said, I already took them. She goes, there was like 30. I'm like, yep. Yeah. She goes, well, you have a baby. Are you driving right now with that baby? I said, yep. And oof, that lands.
How
That
are you
stuff
doing
lands.
today?
She has been through every phase of my life
What?
with me, and I had to sit there and tell her the worst of the worst. That is bad, that is ugly, that is gross. So I was afraid of her. And one of my instructions was to stop making amends to her because I don't know if you remember those dates that, October 30th of 2002, I quit drinking. It's easy to quit drinking when you're doing drugs. But I made some fake amends to her because I got a sponsor and saddled up and was ready to do this deal. And then again, I changed my sobriety date again to June 20th of 2004. And I think I made some feeble amends to her again then. So by the time I really just was done with it all, my sponsor was like, yeah, we're going to let her come to you if she so chooses. The amends that you get to make to your oldest childhood friend is to leave her be and to let her live a life without having to think about you and to let her mourn the death of her dad without having to think about what piece of work you are to have dared come and taken something from them so haphazardly or casually and manipulative. Leave her be. And so I did. I left her be. And fast forward to, I think it was year 2, maybe it was year 3 on the sobriety date. I was really, truly safe, sane, and sober. And it was my high school reunion. And when you get sober and you're in the town that you grew up in, they ask you to help with stuff like that. And that was one of those amends that I made, living amends. I couldn't possibly make amends to all the boys that I dumped, all the teachers I'd messed over, all the lies I'd told. So I said, sure. And I helped plan that darn reunion. And with that, I knew I was going to have to see this woman. And I was really scared to see her and I didn't know how to do it. And I had all the support and all the love, all my friends were surrounding me and they knew it was going to be hard for me, but you can't save it. And I remember I walked up to her, she'd shown up and I walked up to her and I just did something really awkward. I rubbed her. I said, this is me breaking the ice. And I just walked away. And over the course of the next few weeks, she was posting pictures of that reunion. And I was in some of those pictures. And the caption read, some of my favorite people. And she didn't say my name. I don't know if she meant me, but I took it as a win. And a few years later, she came back into town for something or other, and she tracked me down and we took a run together. I was training for the Missoula Marathon. And she said, hey, I heard you're training for the Missoula Marathon. I'm doing the Ragnar and I'd like to get a training run in. Can we run together? And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I said, yes, of course. And we ran 15 miles. And I mean, long stretches of not talking, long stretches of not talking. And finally, she said, my mom's mom was an alcoholic. And she told me that one day when I came home and I cried and I didn't want to look you up. I didn't want to think about you. And she forgives you. And she loves you. And she sees you all the time at Rose Hours with your babies. And she has friends that know you in recovery. And she thinks really highly of you. And so I decided that I wanted to reach out to you and tell you that I forgive you. And I want you in my life. And I mean, that was not a scary entrance for me. And so I softened enough to just let it go and to look bad, feel bad, and do bad and be sheepish but humbled in her presence. I'm not going to throw myself at anybody. I didn't need her forgiveness to feel good about myself because the truth is I have an unshakable core today through working the 12 steps to the best of my ability on a loop. I'm never done. There's no like planting the flag at the top. Yay, I'm done. And showing up to events sober and being really honest. When I went through all that stuff with cancer, I had to take a bunch of meds because I had like all sorts of complications and stuff. I ended up having like 13 surgeries in about 3 years. And I had to get really honest and I had to let my sponsor know that I don't have a real good perception on what my pain level is. I'll tell you it's 50 every time. What's your pain level? 50? Did that kick in? Nope, not quite yet. And I started praying to have that removed as well. I don't want narcotics to make me feel good anymore. I don't want to want them. I want to live a life clean and honest and real. And so darn it if I didn't get my wish. That stuff makes me really sick now. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful that I can come here and fit right in. I can fit right in and you don't have to like me. I don't have to be your cup of tea. I can be too bright and my lipstick too red for an 8 a.m. meeting. Thanks, Dave B. I was thinking about him on my way in today, and I saw an eagle. That's the new thing. I'm very connected to what makes me feel safe today, and that is God, and that is Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous worked well. The 12th step is really important for me today because that means that it's not when and how it's not if I give to you. It's when and how I give to you. I don't have to give everything. Giving from an empty cup was like the first 10 years of my recovery. Absolutely. I'll be there. I'll do it. And I would make 4 phone calls. You asked me to speak last Sunday, and I was like, yes. And then I thought, but I would have to make 3 phone calls to be there on short notice. And I thought, no, I can't. I'm going to be accountable. And my ego, she just rears its ugly head so often. But so I was able to respond in a normal, sane way, like, hey, sorry, that doesn't work out. Keep me in mind for the future. So here we are, for better or worse. And something that's really been new in my life the last 3 or 4 years is meditation and connection to my higher power in that way, in quiet. I didn't know how to get quiet before. I was very nervous. I'm learning so much about like I said, I'm in therapy and I'm learning stuff, and I'm a life coach, and I take all sorts of classes and certifications. And what I'm learning is that I lived in fight or flight for a really long time. And there's a new one that they're coming up with. They're calling it appeasement. And I lived in that for a long time. If you're okay, I'm okay. And if you think I'm okay, then I'm even better. And so that's a full-time job at 2 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old. For many, many years, that's how I lived my life, as if you thought I was doing okay, that I am okay. And over the course of many 4th step, 5th steps, tears, getting it wrong, feeling bad, blaming others, being right and righteous, I've landed on just radical acceptance, along with that radical honesty, that I don't care if you like me or if you like it or you like how I'm doing it. Because at the very end of the day, when I do that 10th step and I send it to my sponsor willy-nilly, I don't recheck it for errors or anything like that. I know it's honest. And I know I'm not going to revisit it again until I'm on my knees in the morning saying my prayers. And when I get really good and quiet and it's just me and my higher power, I weep. No matter what happens, I know I've connected when I start leaking out my eyes. It's not a thought process. I'm not thinking, this is so spiritual. I'm so happy to be here. This is so moving. None of that. It's just I plug in and I weep, and I know. And that is trust. And that is trust in myself, not in my ability to quit drinking. Hell no. I hope I never regain that trust. I know I have another drink in me if I don't show up with you guys. And if I start lying and hiding and cheating and being right all the time, but yeah, and all that malarkey, I know that I won't have a lucid thought. It won't be like, should I drink? I'll never have that privilege again. Somebody said recently, every time you take that first drink, you're sober. Oh, true story. So no, I don't think I'll ever get that gift again of maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. It will be sudden and profound. And if I make it back to your loving arms, I hope I really learned whatever I was supposed to learn. If I strayed or I said no, or I started doing, bad things again and trying to feel good about it, man, that's a slippery slope. So I just continue to show up, look bad. Oh man, feel bad a lot. Life isn't perfect. That's for sure. It's a weird time in life. I went through a medical menopause, and I don't know if anybody's gone through that before, but I'm not mildly, inconvenienced or a little bit bitchy. I'm full blown violent and homicidal, like truly. I mean, I have sat my husband down more than once, but like, you can't make that sound. You can't. Um, and my kids are still at home. I have teenage boys. And my folks are ailing and they all live here, and I have like 4 people over the age of 80 that I'm really worried about, physically, mentally, spiritually, all the time. But it's not such a worry that I'm going to live my life trying to fix it. I show up and I say, how can I help? And whatever your response is, I am willing to accept it because I now know that I can't fix you. I can't help you unless you want it. I do believe in the responsibility statement that when anyone anywhere reaches out for help, I want the hand of AA, not Kelly, not my dear friend Sue. It doesn't say that. But we collectively are AA. So yeah, we want to be here for you. And for that, I am responsible. But I don't necessarily go fishing anymore. I used to go fishing because it was like a notch on my bedpost. Like I felt so good. I'd go to meetings and like count how many women in my lineage were there. I'm like, oh, look at us. We're so awesome. And then I hit rock bottom in sobriety and realized that that's all BS. It's all BS, man. It's anyone, anywhere reaching out for the help. It doesn't matter if you're a day sober, if you're not yet sober, or if you're 30 years sober. I want to be there, but I'm going to meet you where you are. And I'll assess if I can properly administer any help to you. And if I don't think I can help you, I won't. And I will tell you that today. And that's a big relief for me. And it helps me navigate freely and keep that energy flowing so that I can do things and say yes when, normally I'd still be in my PJs. So I hope that made any sort of sense. Welcome to you. Welcome to you guys. Good to see you again. Happy birthday, Amy. And thanks for asking me to speak today. And thank you, Aiden, for introducing me. I really appreciate it.